Of chapter 28, preparing to go shopping. So, starting off at the beginning. Mane erat. It was early in the morning. Erat, of course, comes from sum esse fui futurus. It is the imperfect, eram, eras, erat, eramus, eratus, erant, such that it is then going to be it was. If it were present, est, sum est, sumus est, it'd be it is. And if it were future, ero, eris, erit, erimus, eritis, erunt, it would be, of course, it will be. But here it is imperfect. It was early in the morning. Aurelia was sitting, sedebat, imperfect, in the bedroom. Crines eas curabant duae anculae. Duae anculae is our nominative plural subject. Two slave ladies were taking care of, were caring for the hair of her, or her hair. Eas, remember, comes from the personal pronouns is, ea, id, eas, eas. And remember that the personal pronouns always refer to someone else, and so it'd be her hair or the hair of her, not the slave ladies, but someone else, Aurelia. Quarum, altera speculum tenebat, altera crines pectebat. Altera in line 2 means one and another, and they are used correlatively, and the first altera and the second altera are being used with quarum. Now remember that quarum is a relative pronoun from qui, quod, cujus, and so forth and so on. It is genitive plural, and so you would say altera quarum, one of whom, tenebat, was holding a mirror, speculum, altera, the other, and then imply the quarum again, of whom was combing her hair, crines, accusative direct object. Now, the antecedent of the quarum are the anculae, meaning that the quarum represents or relates to the anculae, as quarum is a relative pronoun. Because anculae is plural, quarum is plural. Because anculae is feminine, quarum is feminine. But quarum, in its clause, the relative clause introduced by quarum, altera speculum tenebat, it is a genitive because it is part of a whole. The altera is a part of the quarum, which is the genitive whole, both of the slave ladies. And so, remember, it will agree with its antecedent in number and gender, but not in case necessarily. Moving on to Phrygia. Phrygia, quae, who, pectebat, was combing the crines, the hair, negligently. Phrygia is the subject of vexabat. Phrygia was annoying her mistress. Dominam, the feminine of master, is mistress. So, here again, quae is the relative pronoun introducing its own clause. The main clause is Phrygia dominam vexabat. Phrygia was annoying the mistress. Whereas the relative clause, the subordinate clause, quae pectebat, is of course then having the distinction that it cannot stand on its own. Who was combing the hair negligently. Quae agrees with Phrygia in number, singular, and gender, feminine, but here, quae happens to be a nominative because it is subject of its clause, and Phrygia happens to be nominative because it's the subject of its clause. So it does agree in case, but only because they're doing the same thing in their own individual clauses. Also, for negligenter, it is an adverb from the adjective that we're going to see a little bit later, negligens, or as you can see it down in line 4, negligentes. Sorry about the word being cut off somewhat. Sira, now starting in line 3 in the middle. Quod. Now here, this is not the quod that comes from qui, quod. Instead, this quod is called a causal quod. And so you know it is not going to be a relative because it doesn't have a singular neuter antecedent. And since it doesn't, then that means it is not going to be a relative pronoun introducing its relative clause. So Sira, because manus tremebat, because her hand was trembling, she, non bene tenebat, was not holding well the speculum, the mirror, was not holding the mirror well. Tenebat being your imperfect. Aurelia igitur, Aurelia therefore, the one vexata. Now this is a perfect passive participle. Remember that perfect passive participles are fourth principal parts, and this is the fourth principal part of the verb, vexo, vexare, vexavi, vexatus. And it is modifying our subject Aurelia. So Aurelia, therefore, the one, having been annoyed, or just simply annoyed, negligentia, with a long A, by the negligence, by the carelessness, earum, of them, remember that comes from issea id, suddenly clamavit, suddenly shouted, did shout, has shouted, quam negligentes estis, Here, quam is also not the quam from the relative pronoun chart. Qui, quae, quod, cus, 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 quick, 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 quim, quam. Instead, this is the quam of exclamation, and you can see it obviously is showing an exclamation here, and it translates how. How negligent, how careless y'all are. Abite, abite, go away, go away. Vocate, another imperative plural, call Cornelia. Wolo, I want. Ducere, to take, to lead. Eam, her, from is, id, as, ae, eam, accusative direct object, and it's her as a personal pronoun. May cum, with me, another personal pronoun, may, with cum attached to it. May in the ablative is the object of cum. In urban, in plus accusative, into the city. I want to take her into the city with me. Statum exierunt anculae, immediately. The slave ladies exited. This is your verb eo, ire, ee, with an x on the front. So not just to go, but to go out. And so the exi is your perfect stem, as it would be from ex eo, ex ire, ex ee. Remember, in the third principal part, it's a perfect stem, everything except for the long I. Then on the end of it, you put your perfect endings, e, isti, it, imis, istis, erunt, which we see here. And so immediately the slave ladies went out, did go out, have gone out. Mox in cubiculum in it, Cornelia. Soon Cornelia did go in, has gone in, went in. Same exact thing with exierunt. The in is now the new prefix, and so not just to go, but to go in. And here ini is your perfect stem from in eo, in ire, in ee. And then onto it you have the perfect ending it. Did go in, into the bedroom. Cur me vocavisti mater. Why have you called? Why did you call? Perfect ending with a perfect stem. Me, mother, in the vocative case, of course. Aurelia responded. If this were responds, you would have the exact same spelling of the stem, because for this verb, respondeo, respondere, respondi, the perfect and the present stem are identical. But in the present tense, since this is a second conjugation verb, it would be an E as your present vowel, and then the present ending T. Here what we have is a perfect stem, respond, and E isti it, a perfect ending, she responded. Pater tuus, your father, and then we have to go find the verb. And I'm going to skip from in quibus down to praeclari. That's its own clause. And so I keep going, and it's there, invitavit. So your father, hodie invitavit, today, has invited amicos quosdam. Now, pay attention to quosdam. If ever you have a form of qui, quae, quod, cujus, 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 all of those relative pronouns, but on to the end of it is the letters dam, now it is going to be a new demonstrative that is going to be known as an uncertain demonstrative, or a demonstrative that essentially lets you know that you don't have an exact person that you're talking about. And so here it is modifying amicos, and it's called the indefinite because we don't know definitely these friends, but they are merely just certain friends. Now you look at not the DAM part to figure out what it's modifying. Instead, you look at the qui, quae, quod part. And since quos is accusative plural, amicos is accusative plural, you know that the word certain needs to be modifying friends. So your father has today invited certain friends ad canam to dinner. In quibus, in whom, among whom, from qui, quae, quod, there are famous senators, or among whom are famous senators. So among these friends. Now the quibus refers back to the amicos, and that's why quibus is plural, because amicos is plural, its antecedent, and quibus then is going to now, as it is all the way across in the chart, quibus, 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 all three possible genders, we know that this quibus is masculine because it is taking amicos as its antecedent. She continues, porcum servus jam amit. A slave, jam, already. Jam can mean now or already, but with it is a perfect verb, and that's exactly what amit is, from mo, emere, Amy, with a long E. That is a perfect stem and a perfect ending it. The present would be em, but a short e, present vowel I, and then present ending t. So the only difference between buys present and bought, which is what we have here, did buy, has bought, is the fact that that E would be long, indicating the perfect stem. So a slave already has bought a pig, porcum, said ego, but I, and that is the verb, habeo, with an O ending, ego emphasizing, I have in mind, and it's ego ipsa. Since it's ego ipsa, and ipsa is from ipse ipsa psum, just like illa illa alud, it forms in the exact same way. Here, because it is an intensifier, it is going to be I, myself. If it were habet, and it was the subject she, it'd be she, herself. But in fact, here, of course, it is intensifying the subject I, and it is in the nominative modifying it. I, myself, have in mind ire, to go, in urbem, into the city, ad mercatorum quindam. Now, I don't look at the dam part that is right there to figure out what it's modifying. You look at the qui, quae, quod part, and here it's quin, which is really a quim in the accusative, but whenever an M is in front of a D, it will often turn into an N, to a certain merchant, and that quin tells me it's modifying mercatorum. Cuius, which is, of course, a relative pronoun from qui, quae, quod, whose shop, or the shop of whom, it needs to be in the genitive, non procul bias, is not. Procul, far, ob, away. Whose shop is not far away. So, again, but I, myself, have in mind to go into the city to a certain merchant whose shop is not far away. Cuius is singular because mercatorum, its antecedent is singular. Cuius is masculine. It is masculine, feminine, and neuter in the chart, but here I know that it's masculine because it has to have the same gender as its antecedent. But note that mercatorum and cuius do not have the same case. A relative pronoun does not have to have the same case as the antecedent, and so it's the shop of whom or whose shop. Cuius in its clause, cuius down to ab est, is showing possession as a genitive, whereas mercatorum in its clause is accusative as the object of the preposition ad. Continuing on with the sentence translation, nam, for, ille, that, masculine one, that guy, referring, of course, as to this merchant, solet, soleo, solere, is accustomed, vendere, to sell, glires optimos, the best dormice. It's a little creature that was somewhat of a delicacy, and indeed, they are going to eat them for this fancy meal. See to vis mecum ire. Vis, of course, comes from volo, vele, volui. Its present tense would be volo, vis, volt, volumus, voltus, volunt. I want, you want, he wants, we want, y'all want, they want. So if you want, you are wanting, mecum ire, to go with me, expecta, the infinitive with an re chopped off, a singular imperative, await or look out for me in the atrium. Meanwhile, in Taria, Ube bow. Here it is future, I can see the bow. I will order the slaves. Ferre, from ferro, ferre tulilatus, to bring the selos, the sedan chairs, ad yanawam, to the door. Sedan chairs are kind of like litters, but they are individual chairs that are carried along by slaves, and this is going to be the mode of transportation with which Aurelia and Cornelia are going to be going to the market in Rome to do a little bit of shopping. So hopefully this translation was of help to you, and I wish you luck in preparing for Chapter 28 materials. Thank you so much.